I didn't lose her because of the age gap. I lost her because when it mattered, I chose to disappear. It started with a question I wasn't ready to answer. When my neighbor looked at me and asked, "Did you ask me out?" I smiled, felt my throat tighten and said, "Actually, I was just joking." I said it lightly, like the words didn't weigh anything. But the moment they landed between us, I knew I'd picked the easy way out. She paused, nodded once, and said something I didn't expect. Not anger. Not embarrassment. Just this. Then don't say things you're not willing to stand behind. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't wait for a response. She turned and walked back to her house. That sentence followed me inside like a bruise I couldn't hide.
My name is Ethan. I'm 28. I'm telling you this because stories like mine don't start with disasters. They start with small decisions that feel harmless. I had a steady job in the support at a medical office. I quiet rental of Maple Regal Drive, and I habit of avoiding anything that might force me to choice.
I fixed other people's problems all day and told myself that meant I was responsible. But responsibility isn't what you do when it's safe. It's what you do when you could look foolish and do it anyway. Claire moved in next door in early spring. 41. Composed. The kind of woman who listens before she speaks. She didn't flirt. She didn't test me. She carried herself like someone who'd already paid for mistakes and wasn't eager to repeat the bill. I noticed her because she didn't need attention. And instead of stepping up, I studied her from a distance, like wanting something without admitting it could keep me clean. That night I'd come home angry at myself. My supervisors snapped at me in front of a patient. A routine problem turned into a public correction. I stepped outside for air and found Claire checking her mailbox, wrapped in a light sweater. We talked about nothing. Weather. Deliveries. The usual. And then I did what I always did when I felt small. I tried to sound relaxed. Confident. I joked about taking her out sometime, like it was a throwaway line. She stopped, faced me, and asked the question straight. I could have said yes. I could have said I meant it. Instead, I lied to keep my balance. After she went inside, I stayed on my porch longer than I should have. I didn't feel relieved. I felt exposed. The next morning, I saw her through her kitchen window as I backed out of my driveway. She didn't look up. She didn't owe me anything. And that hurt more than if she had. That afternoon, I made it worse. I didn't knock on her door. I didn't clear the air. I opened my phone and texted a friend, trying to regain control with humor. I wrote something casual about the older woman next door and added a laughing emoji. I stared at the screen for a second, then hit send. It felt like armor. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. My friend replied with a joke even harsher than mine. I read it twice, felt a knot tighten in my stomach, and put the phone face down. That was the consequence. Not because Claire saw the text, but because I did. I'd reduced a real person to a line meant to get a laugh. I couldn't pretend I was confused anymore. I'd chosen how to treat her. That evening, I heard voices next door. Laughter. A man's voice I didn't recognize. I stood in my living room with the lights off, watching the glow from her windows spill onto the lawn. I didn't move. I didn't wave. I didn't cross the 10 feet between our houses. Instead, I stayed where I was and let someone else fill the space I'd stepped away from. Later, when the house went quiet, I deleted the text thread. Not because it fixed anything, but because I didn't want the proof. I sat on the edge of my couch and did nothing. And doing nothing was the most honest action I'd taken all day. That night taught me something without explaining it to me. You don't lose people all at once. You train yourself to be the kind of man they don't wait for. And once you do that, the silence isn't accidental. It's earned. By the time I turned off the lights, I knew one thing for sure. I hadn't just told a bad joke. I'd shown Claire exactly who I was when the moment asked for more. And once you show someone that, you don't get to decide what they do with it. The first time I saw him with her, I didn't feel jealous. I felt exposed, like the neighborhood had finally put a name to what I'd been trying to hide. Claire wasn't the woman next door anymore. She was a choice I'd refused to make, standing in the open with someone else's confidence beside her. My name is Ethan. I'm 28, and I'm telling you this because men don't usually lose love in a dramatic crash. We lose it in slow motion, while telling ourselves we're being careful. If you've ever watched a door close and realized your own hand was on the knob, you'll know exactly what I mean. After that night on my porch, I tried to behave like nothing happened. I left for work early, came home late, kept my blinds half closed. The problem with living on Maple Ridge Drive is that it's the kind of place where people notice when you start avoiding daylight. Old habits of mine, staying invisible, staying safe, didn't look safe anymore. They looked guilty. Claire kept her distance. Not rudely. Not theatrically. Just cleanly. If we crossed paths at the curb, she'd nod like we were polite strangers. If I brought my trash bins in and saw hers still out, I didn't touch them. I'd lost the right to be helpful. And that was the first hook in my chest. I missed her in the smallest ways, the ways that don't sound romantic until they're gone. Then the neighborhood did what neighborhoods do. It started with Mrs. Klein 2 houses down, 60-something, always watering her flowers like it was a full-time job. One morning she caught me near my mailbox and smiled too wide. "You and Claire settling in okay next door to each other?" she asked, like it was an interview. I mumbled something neutral. She leaned in a little. "She's a good woman," she added. "Been through a lot." Then she looked at me, waiting for me to say the right thing. I didn't. I just nodded and escaped to my car, heart beating like I'd been accused of something. That's when I realized, even strangers could see the story I was refusing to live. 2 days later, I made the second mistake of the week. I mentioned Claire at lunch with my coworkers, trying to sound casual. "My neighbor's pretty cool," I said. It was nothing. But my friend Mark, 30, loud, always hunting for a laugh, raised his eyebrows. "Claire? The older one," he said. "Man, don't get yourself tangled up. That's a whole different league." A couple guys chuckled. Not cruelly. Just casually. Like it was normal to reduce a woman to a warning label. And here's the part that still turns my stomach. I laughed too. Not because it was funny. Because I wanted to stay accepted. Because I didn't want to be the guy defending a 41-year-old woman like she was already mine. I told myself I was keeping things light. What I was really doing was practicing betrayal with a smile. That night, I pulled into my driveway and saw a dark sedan parked in front of Claire's house. A man stepped out, mid-40s maybe, neat jacket, calm posture. He carried a small bag like he belonged there. Claire opened her door before he even reached it, like she'd been expecting him. She smiled, small, real, and for a second I forgot to breathe. I stayed in my car, engine off, hands on the steering wheel, watching like a thief watches a home he once visited. They didn't kiss. Nothing dramatic. He just said something that made her laugh, and the sound hit me harder than any insult. Because it wasn't about romance. It was about ease. He was easy for her. I was work. I was risk. My phone buzzed. Mark had texted me a meme, something about cougars. I stared at it, then at Claire's porch, and felt heat crawl up my neck. I didn't reply. I didn't laugh. I just deleted it. Too late to be noble, but I tried anyway. The next afternoon I saw Claire outside, dragging a heavy planter toward her steps. Instinct kicked in. I walked over fast. "Hey, let me," I said, reaching for it. She didn't let go. She looked at my hands on the pot, then at my face. "You don't have to," she said quietly. "I want to," I answered. And I meant it. She held my gaze long enough that I felt my throat tighten. Then she released the planter and stepped back. "Thank you," she said. "But, keep it simple, Ethan. Keep it simple." 2 words that sounded like a boundary and a warning at the same time. As I set the planter down, I noticed the dark sedan again, parked farther up the street. The man was waiting in his car, not impatient, not territorial. Just present. Claire followed my eyes and didn't explain. She didn't owe me an explanation. But she did say one more thing before she went inside. "People like to talk," she said, almost gently. "If you ever decide you mean something, don't let them speak for you." Then she closed her door. And I stood on her porch for a second too long, hearing Mrs. Klein's hose running, feeling the neighborhood watching, and realizing the next move was mine. Finally, painfully mine. I went home and I waited. The moment that broke me wasn't a breakup. It was a sentence spoken in a calm voice, in front of people who didn't even realize they were holding a mirror up to my face. A man I barely knew looked at Claire, then at me, and said, "I don't hide the woman I'm proud to be with." Nobody laughed. Nobody argued. The air just shifted. And I stood there with my hands in my pockets, feeling like the smallest man on the block. My name is Ethan. I'm 28. If you've been watching this thinking, just tell her you mean it, trust me, there's a reason some men don't. It's not that we don't care. It's that we're terrified of being seen caring, because once you admit it out loud, you can't pretend you were only passing time. That's what this episode is about. The week I stopped being the nice guy next door, and realized I was becoming something worse, quietly, politely, without even raising my voice. It started with a fragile kind of closeness. Claire didn't suddenly melt. She didn't chase me. But after her line, "If you ever decide you mean something, don't let them speak for you," I began showing up in small ways. Not with speeches. With actions. I carried her groceries when I saw her hands full. I fixed a loose porch light for her. I left a note in her mailbox after a storm. "If you need help with branches, I'm home." It was tame. And somehow, it felt like courage. One evening she knocked on my door with a small paper bag and a look that said she'd debated the decision for an hour. "I made too much," she said. "Thought you might want some." It was soup. Simple. But it felt like an invitation into her world. We ate at my kitchen counter. Nothing fancy. The conversation surprised me. Claire wasn't distant in a cold way. She was distant like someone who had learned that love can cost more than money. She asked about my job, my family, the way I ended up in this neighborhood. I asked about her move, her work, the quiet way she carried herself. She didn't tell me everything, but she told me enough for my chest to feel tight. When she laughed, really laughed, it made me want to be better. And that scared me more than attraction ever had. Because closeness brings a question. Not, "Do you like me?" but, "What are you going to do about it?" 2 days later, that question found me in the worst place possible. My own driveway with my own friends, under the bright, careless gaze of the neighborhood. Mark came over with another coworker to watch a game. We were standing outside, talking nonsense, when Claire walked out of her house at the same time. She wore a light jacket, hair pulled back, keys in hand. She glanced over, and for a second it felt like she might keep walking. Then she gave me a small nod, like a truce. Mark grinned, loud enough for everyone. "There she is," he said. "Your mystery woman." Claire stopped. Not shocked, just still. My mouth went dry. I should have said, "This is Claire. She's my neighbor." I should have introduced her properly, like she was a person and not a rumor. Instead, I did something ugly. I tried to laugh it off. "Relax," I said, half smiling. "We're just neighbors." The words came out fast, like I was saving myself. And the second I said them, I saw it on her face. Not heartbreak. Not drama. Something colder, confirmation. She gave a polite smile. "Have a good night," she said, and walked to her car. Mark elbowed me. "Smart," he muttered. "Don't get trapped." I didn't answer. I watched her taillights vanish, and I felt like I'd shoved her out the door with my own hands. That night, I tried to fix it with a text. Coward's tool. "Sorry about earlier. Mark's an idiot. I didn't mean it like that." I stared at the screen, waiting for the dots to appear. They never did. The next day, Claire didn't avoid me. She did something worse. She treated me the way you treat someone you no longer expect anything from. When we crossed paths, she nodded and kept moving. When I offered to help with her trash bins, she said, "I've got it." And then the real twist came. Friday evening, I came home and saw the dark sedan again, only this time it wasn't parked casually. It was parked right at her curb, like a statement. The same man stepped out. Mid-40s, steady eyes, clean jacket. He carried a small bouquet, nothing flashy, just a simple bunch like he knew what mattered to her. Claire opened the door before he knocked. I stood on my porch pretending to check my mail, watching like a man who'd set his own house on fire and was now angry at the smoke. They walked down the steps together. When they reached the sidewalk, the man looked up and saw me. He didn't smirk. He didn't challenge me. He simply nodded, like an adult acknowledging another adult. Then he said something soft to Claire. She smiled, smaller than before, but real. They started toward the sedan. And that's when I did the one thing I'd avoided since the beginning. I walked off my porch. "Claire," I called, voice rough. She stopped, turned. Her expression wasn't hopeful. It was careful. "I meant it," I said. "Back then, I meant it." She studied me for a long beat, then glanced at the man beside her. He didn't move. He didn't step in. He just waited, like he wasn't afraid of the outcome. Claire looked back at me and said quietly, "You want me when it's private. But you don't want me when anyone can see." The words landed hard because they were true. I opened my mouth to argue, but nothing honest came out. Then the man finally spoke. "Not cruel, worse than cruel. Certain. I don't hide the woman I'm proud to be with," he said. That was the moment the street felt too bright. My face burned. I realized Mrs. Klein had paused her watering. I realized a curtain across the road had shifted. I realized this wasn't just my fear anymore. It was public. Claire didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. She got into the car. As the sedan pulled away, Mark's words from earlier echoed in my head. Smart. Don't get trapped. And I understood the price of that kind of smart. Because the truth is, I wasn't trapped. I was free. Free to hide. Free to joke. Free to stay unchallenged. And standing there alone on my porch, I finally understood what that freedom really was. It was loneliness with better excuses. The worst part wasn't watching Claire leave. The worst part was how quickly my life tried to go back to normal, like the universe was saying, "See? You're fine. You didn't die." And that's when I understood how a man can lose the best thing that ever happened to him and still show up to work on Monday. My name is Ethan. I'm 28. If you're here because you think this is a love story, you're right, but it's also a story about pride. About the kind of pride that doesn't feel like arrogance. It feels like caution. Like being smart. And it can quietly ruin you while you call it self-control. After that night on the street, I didn't chase Claire. Not because I didn't want to. Because I didn't know how to walk up to a closed door without turning it into another humiliation. So I did what I'd always done. I disappeared. I took longer routes to my car. I timed my trash bins so I wouldn't see hers. I kept my eyes down like a man avoiding a debt collector. The neighborhood didn't let me forget. Mrs. Klein watered her flowers with a new kind of energy. Mark stopped making jokes and started acting like he'd saved me. "You dodged a bullet," he told me at work. "That guy? He's doing you a favor." I nodded like I agreed. I even smiled. But inside, something was tightening. Because the truth was, the bullet I dodged wasn't Claire. It was the moment I would have had to become a man. 3 days passed. Then 5. Then a week. Claire's porch light still came on at dusk. The dark sedan still appeared sometimes. Not every night. Just enough to remind me that life was moving forward without my permission. One Saturday morning I opened my blinds and saw Claire at the curb, loading something into her trunk. A cardboard box. Neatly taped. Like someone packing up a chapter. My chest went hot and hollow at the same time. I stood there staring like an idiot until she shut the trunk and drove away. I didn't even know where she was going, and it felt wrong that I didn't. That afternoon, I finally left the house to buy groceries. I told myself I was fine. I told myself I needed food, not closure. The store was busy, the kind of weekend crowd where nobody looks at anybody. And that should have helped. It didn't. Because halfway down the aisle, I saw Claire. She was near the end cap, comparing labels with the calm focus that used to make me feel steady. The man from the sedan stood beside her, holding a basket like it was the most natural thing in the world. He wasn't showing off. He wasn't clinging to her. He was just there, present, unashamed. Claire looked up and saw me. For a split second, something flickered in her face. Not warmth. Not anger. Recognition. Like seeing a scar you forgot you had. I froze. My heart started doing that stupid, desperate rhythm it does when you want to run and speak at the same time. I should have walked over. I should have said something simple, anything. Instead, I did the thing I'm ashamed of most. I turned my cart down another aisle. I didn't even have to. Nobody was blocking me. Nobody was staring. The only judge in that moment was her, and me. And I still chose to vanish. By the time I circled back, they were gone. I drove home with bags of groceries I didn't remember picking out. I set them on the counter and just stood there, staring at the wall like my brain was buffering. Then my phone rang. It was my neighbor Frank. Frank lived 2 houses over. Mid-60s. Retired electrician. He had the kind of face that looked like it had seen hard winters and survived them without needing to brag. He'd waved at me 100 times. I'd never really talked to him. "Ethan," he said, calm as always. "You got a minute?" I hesitated. "Yeah." "Come outside," he said. "Front porch. I'm not walking over there twice." I almost laughed. Almost. I went. Frank was sitting in his chair, coffee in hand, looking out at the street like it was a TV show he'd seen every season of. He didn't waste time. "You look like a man who's hungry," he said. "Not for food." I tried to play dumb. "Work's been." He held up a hand. "No. Don't do that. I've watched you for weeks. You're not tired. You're scared." The word hit me hard because it was true and I hadn't heard anyone say it out loud. Frank took a slow sip of coffee. "When I was your age," he said, "I let a good woman walk away because I didn't want to look foolish. Thought I was being careful. Thought I was being smart." I swallowed. "What happened?" He looked at me then, direct. "I got what I wanted. No risk. No embarrassment. And I paid for it every night for 10 years. The porch went quiet. Somewhere down the street a dog barked, then stopped, like it realized this wasn't the moment. Frank leaned back. "Men think they lose women," he said. "Most of the time they lose timing. They lose the moment they could have become the kind of man a woman can trust. And once that moment's gone, you can still get a second chance. But it won't taste the same." My throat tightened. "So what do I do?" Frank didn't give me a speech. He didn't pat my shoulder. He just said, "Stop waiting for your fear to feel polite. Fear doesn't get polite. You do." I sat there like a kid who'd been caught. Because that's exactly what I'd been. Caught by a man who'd already lived my future. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was dreaming about Claire. Because I was seeing myself, 10 years older, living in the same house, still proud of how little I'd risked. Sunday morning, I walked out to my porch before I could talk myself out of it. I pulled my phone out and opened my messages. Claire's name was there, like a door I'd kept locked. My thumb hovered. Then I did something different. I didn't write an apology. I didn't write a joke. I didn't write a paragraph explaining my childhood. I wrote one sentence. "Can we talk, today, face to face? I'll come to you." I stared at it for a long time. And then I hit send. Because for the first time, I wasn't trying to look safe. I was trying to be real. I didn't know whether Claire would answer my message. What I did know was this. The second I hit send, I couldn't hide behind timing anymore. If she ignored me, that was my result. If she said yes, that was my responsibility. Either way, I'd finally stepped out from behind the excuses that had kept me comfortable and alone. My name is Ethan. I'm 28. And I'm telling you the end of this story because people love neat endings. They want the woman to come back, the man to change, and the music to swell. Real life doesn't do music. Real life does consequences. And sometimes the most romantic thing you get is not a perfect reunion. It's a second chance that comes with rules you don't get to negotiate. Claire replied an hour later. One sentence. No emoji. No softness. Tomorrow. 6:30. The cafe on Pine Street. My stomach flipped like I was 15. Then the other feeling came in, heavier, more adult. Not fear of her. Fear of being the man she'd already decided I wasn't. The next day at work I couldn't focus. My hands did the motions, reset a password, replace a cable, but my mind kept replaying my worst moments. The porch joke. The just neighbors. The way I turned my cart down another aisle in the grocery store. Every time I thought I'll explain, I heard Frank's voice. Stop waiting for your fear to feel polite. At 6 o'clock I drove to Pine Street and parked too far away like a coward, then made myself walk the rest. The cafe was warm and quiet. Coffee and cinnamon. Older couples at small tables. A soft hum of life that didn't care about my crisis. Claire was already there. She sat by the window with a mug in both hands, looking outside like she was waiting for the world to prove something. Her hair was pulled back. Simple sweater. No performance. No armor. Just calm. The kind of calm that makes you realize how loud your own insecurity is. I stopped for half a second at the door, and then I walked in. She didn't stand. She didn't smile. She just watched me approach, eyes steady. When I reached the table, she nodded once toward the chair across from her. "Hi," I said, like the word could carry everything I didn't know how to say. "Hi," she answered. Her voice was polite. Not warm. I sat. My hands wanted to fidget, so I folded them together on the table like a man trying to stay still in a storm. Claire took a sip of her drink and then said, "You wanted to talk." This was the part where a younger version of me would try to charm his way out. A joke. A soft excuse. Something that keeps the other person from seeing the ugly truth. I didn't do that. I lied, I said. That night on the porch. I asked you out and I pretended I didn't. Her gaze didn't change. But the air got thinner. I didn't do it because you're 41, I continued. I did it because I was scared of what it would make me look like. And I hate that about myself. She held my eyes. And the other times? She asked. The driveway. Your friends. The store. I swallowed. I disappeared, I admitted. I made you carry it alone. Claire set her mug down carefully. Do you understand what that did? She asked. Not angry. Just direct. Yes, I said, even though the full answer was bigger than one word. It told you I wanted you only when it was private. She didn't flinch. That meant she'd already said it to herself. I took a breath. I'm not asking you to erase it, I said. I'm not asking you to trust me overnight. I'm asking for one chance to show you I can stand behind what I say. Claire looked out the window for a moment, like she was watching her own thoughts pass by. When she looked back, her expression was softer, but not forgiving. There's someone else, she said. The sentence hit me, sharp and clean. I know, I replied. The man with the sedan. His name is Daniel, she said. He's consistent. He doesn't make me feel like a secret. I nodded. You deserve that. That was the first time her eyes flickered, like she hadn't expected me to say it without trying to compete. I leaned forward slightly. I can't promise I'll never be afraid, I said. But I can promise I won't hide. Not again. If I'm with you where people can see it. If you tell me this is too late, I'll take it. But I won't insult you with another excuse. Claire studied me for a long time. The cafe noise faded around us. For a second, I thought she might stand up and leave, and I wouldn't blame her. Then she said quietly, Why now? I could have said because I miss you. I did miss her. But that wasn't the truth underneath. Because I saw my future, I told her. A safe, quiet life where I never risk anything and call it maturity. And it scared me more than losing you. Claire's fingers tightened around her mug. Daniel asked me to take a weekend trip, she said. Nothing dramatic. Just a drive, a cabin, fresh air. I said I'd think about it. My chest tightened. I forced myself not to beg. Not to bargain. I'm not going to tell you not to go, I said. If you choose him, I'll understand why. I just needed you to know. I'm not joking anymore. Claire watched me, and for the first time that night, her face showed something that looked like pain. I liked you, she said, before you gave me reasons not to. My throat burned. I know, I whispered. She sat back. Here's what I can offer, she said. I'm not going to be your lesson. I'm not going to be the woman you learn on and then outgrow. If we do it slowly. I nodded immediately. Slow is fine. She raised her hand slightly, stopping my eagerness like a traffic light. And you need to understand this, she said. I can be with you, but I won't gamble on you the way I might have before. there was the price. Not rejection. Not victory. A second chance with a missing piece. I felt it in my chest, relief and grief at the same time. Because I knew what she meant. I could earn her love back. I could earn her respect. But that innocent, unguarded trust? I had cracked it with my own hands. I accept that, I said. My voice shook once, and I didn't hide it. I earned that boundary. Claire held my gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded. Not a romantic nod. A cautious one. Walk me to my car, she said. Outside the air was cool. The streetlights made soft pools on the sidewalk. We walked side by side, not touching, but close enough that our shoulders almost brushed. At her car, she paused. This doesn't mean you get to relax, she said. I won't, I answered. She opened her door, then looked at me again. For the first time in weeks, she let a small smile appear, brief, fragile. Good night, Ethan, she said. Good night, Claire, I replied. I watched her drive away, and I didn't feel the same panic as before. I felt something steadier. Not certainty. Not a fairy tale. Just the rarest thing a man like me could earn at that point in my life. A chance to be real with no place left to hide. And if you're wondering how this ends, whether Daniel disappeared, whether Claire and I became perfect, here's the truth. We didn't become perfect. But I stopped joking when it mattered. And that changed everything.